Everyone. Today we're going to be looking about the influence of the church on medieval Europe. So welcome to Mr. Kenny's medieval history class. Please like, subscribe, help the channel out, and let's begin. All right, so we were talking about the early Middle Ages earlier, and we talked about how Clovis was able to unite all the people with Christianity. Before we get to that, I love this little comic here. Um, this knight, he has fallen in the mud, the muck. His horse, oh, the poor horse, its hooves are sticking up out of the air. And this is kind of the thought of a lot of people at this time with the church. If I escape this peril, I suppose I shall have to build a church here as a thank offering. In ill sight, I fear. This idea that God had a direct role in your life and you needed to do things to thank Him and honor Him. Anyways, let's get on to this rise of the church. So, in the beginning, Christianity was persecuted. We talked about this last year with Emperor Nero, how he may or may not have been involved with the burning of the city of Rome, but he blamed it on Christians. Um, he then took that land that was burnt by the Christians, it wasn't, and then built a palace over top of it. Seems suspicious. But we know that Constantine, after conquering um, the Eastern Roman Empire, after conquering the Western Roman Empire in his battle against Maxentius, he he issues the Edict of Milan 1 year after that battle at the Milvian Bridge, which makes Christianity legal, had freedom of religion. We know by 395, Emperor Theodosius is actually going to go make Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire. Now, because of the Roman Empire controlled all of Western Europe, we're going to see eventually, essentially all of Western Europe is going to be Roman Catholic. We get this name, Roman Catholic, because of the Roman Empire and the city of Rome. Now, we talked in our last class about how Europe was in shambles. It lost the protection and order that the Roman Empire created. One of the few things that remained was the Catholic Church. And so they're going to provide a tremendous amount of services, as you read about, to the people of Europe. So monasteries are going to be one of the primary ways this happens. Monks are going to provide hospitality to those traveling, might give medical attention to people. They're going to be educating people. People will go to the monks, asking how to do some of their farming and things like that. Like I said, medical with hospitals. Monks are going to be helping the regular people of Europe. While most Europeans are on their own, they don't have a strong government helping them. They have the church. This is an important thing to realize with the importance of the church, how the church was there for them. And we'll show how the church becomes so powerful during this time. So the church really became the center of life for people in Europe. And because of the church being a long lasting institution, because of people valuing the church and wanting to tithe, meaning give gifts to the church is going to become the largest landowner in Europe. Now, we talked about this before, and we'll continue to talk about this as we discuss feudalism next week. Land equals power equals money. So this is going to go and wind up giving an incredible amount of wealth to the Catholic Church as well, the amount of land that they will possess. And think about it. The church land, if every single manor and every town has a church, if every area has a place dedicated to the church, and you add all that up together, it's going to be way more than any of the kings or barons of Europe. Sometimes land was taken by force, of course. If you were excommunicated and there was a war, you might have some of your land taken. And of course, a noble will take some of it, but then the rest of it goes to the church. All right. Another thing that's going to wind up going and having the church influence is the language Latin. Latin, of course, was the language of Rome, and it becomes the official language of the church. It also becomes the official language of education, because pretty much all of the education systems now remaining are going to be through the church. Rome provided education before, Rome is gone. Now the church is educating those wealthy elite. Now you have to realize, though, that the vast majority of people in Europe are not going to know how to read or write. Particularly, they're not going to know Latin. So basically, people are going to speak in their vernacular, their native tongue. You know, we're going to have Proto French going, Proto Spanish. The earliest iterations. We have Old English, and Germanic, all of these things. People are going to speak those languages, but the educated and books and in church is going to be Latin. What's kind of crazy is that Latin was the language of church for a long time. My mother remembers sitting in Mass in the 1950s and early 1960s, and the priest speaking Latin. And here's the thing: the priest will be speaking Latin in Mass, the church service, but the people aren't going to know it. In fact, sometimes even the priests didn't really know Latin. They memorized how to say things and would be recitating these things, and they might not even know what they're saying. One thing to remember: every town and village, every manor, castles even had churches or chapels. So it's going to be everywhere. The sign of the cross, the church. Now, like I said, land equals power equals money. The church is the most powerful institution in Europe during the Middle Ages. I'm going to repeat that for emphasis. The church is the most powerful institution during the Middle Ages. In class time, if we were together, I would probably say this 4 or 5 times, and then I would be asking each of you, hey, what's the most powerful institution during the Middle Ages? To hammer this in. It is important. The church is incredibly strong and powerful at this time, more powerful than kings, queens, barons, knights, anybody. And it's because of the land that they had, first off with wealth, but also it is the belief that the church had the power to decide if you were going to heaven or if you were going somewhere else. Think about that. Now, we discussed in our early Middle Ages lecture a little bit that there were a lot of things that could get you. You could die pretty easily at this time. There are so many sicknesses. We don't have the vaccines like we do today to keep you healthy. You don't have to worry about starvation. You don't have to worry about Vikings raiding and killing you, or the Magyars raiding and killing you. So your work was your life. You worked all day, every day, basically, so that you didn't starve to death. If bad weather came, you might starve or see members of your family or friends starve. Your lives were hard. From the moment you could walk, you were helping your family with work. So people's lives were short and bad. But think about this: eternal paradise, heaven. This idea that, yes, today might be hard, but with faith, you can wind up have an eternity of paradise. So heaven was something that was very important, this idea. And people will listen to the church because they believed if they didn't follow the church's laws that they wouldn't have heaven. Now we have to remember, this is actually against what Christianity preaches. Christianity isn't about works, it's about faith in Jesus Christ as your Savior. And that it's not what you did, but what Christ did. But to the people at this time, that wasn't actually the doctrine often being preached. Remember, they can't even really understand usually what's being said during church. So important people at this time are the clergy, priests, bishops, cardinals. The most important, of course, is the Pope. Now, these people are going to be interacting with the regular masses, having church services, listening to confessions. At this time, the doctrine was that you had to confess your sins to the priest. The more modern Protestant belief is that Christ serves as an intermediary for you, so you don't need a priest. Although there are still people today who go and follow the route of confession. So that's something that still exists today. The thing to note is the church gave comfort to those people during the hard times. Think about the important events, the happy events, weddings, baptisms, all of these. So the big events in people's lives are going to happen through the church. So the church is going to have a lot of good, fond thoughts and memories with this. So what's another thing that's important about the church? The fact is the church gave jobs to people. The church built a lot. They had a lot of wealth, and so they used that wealth to build things to honor God. So all those churches and eventually cathedrals are going to be huge components in the economies of these areas. Because think about building a building. It's more than just going and having the builders have the job. You have to pay the architect. They have to design it. When you're building, you have masons, so the people who work with stone, carpenters, the people who work with wood. They, of course, have to get their materials, so you have to pay the transportation to get it. Then, of course, if you're paying the people who are transporting the materials, you need to pay the stable owners and all of that who take care of the animals, the horses that pull those carts. Of course, then have the cart makers involved in as well, the farmers who go and grow the feed for the animals. Not to mention, of course, stone just doesn't come out like that. You have to have the quarry workers to be able to go haul the stone. You have to have the lumberjacks get the. Are you seeing my point? How building a building is so much more than just the builders. It provides tons and tons and tons of jobs. And so cathedrals, as they start being built in the medieval period, are going to be these gigantic churches. We'll see some pictures on the next slide to see how large and grandiose they are, and how many people for so long they're going to wind up helping through this building. The church is also going to collect taxes. So because there's not really the political structure before, there's no organization because Rome is gone for a long time. The church is going to be the ones that are going and getting the money from the people. Now, some of this is in tithes that are gifts to the church, but the church will often be used by the governments to help go and collect the money. And what this is going to do is this is going to shift the economy from an agrarian agriculture barter-based society where you go have Lily trading her sheep for Hayden's wood. You're not going to go and have Caleb going and trading his wheat for some bricks that we had Avery made. This is now going to start being based on money. Another thing that the church did, and it goes back to our discussion about the church, people believed had the power over heaven and HE double hockey sticks, was that they could keep the peace through the threat of excommunication. Excommunication is being not allowed to participate in any church activities. And that means, you can't get married in church, which weddings will, happen at churches. You can't have a funeral. You can't be buried, which the doctrine at that time was the idea you had to be buried in sacred grounds or church ground, or you would not take part in the resurrection and the second coming of Christ, meaning you wouldn't be resurrected, meaning you wouldn't have a new body, meaning you wouldn't be in heaven. That's serious. So if a noble was acting uncouthly, wasn't following church laws, the threat of excommunication often would get the church, the noble, to start acting the right way, because often too, excommunication could go further than just the person who's being naughty. It could go to his whole family or all of his vassals and subjects. So this was a tremendous threat, and so it could often keep the peace in Rome. We talked about excommunication earlier this year, so I kind of went through it quickly when we talked about our Great Schism of 1054, when we studied the Byzantine Empire. Anyways, here's some pictures of cathedrals. Now, notice the size of this person here in relation to this building. Once again, we have people, the building. Oh my goodness, look at these, big buses and cars here in relation to the building. So cathedrals were huge. They sometimes took hundreds of years to build. So think about all the jobs for all that time they were creating. Anyways, this is Mr. Kenny in his medieval history class. I hope that you guys are having a great day. I miss you all. Please do me a favor, press the like, subscribe button. Have a wonderful day. I will see you later.